Hello, everyone. Welcome to VRIC Media, your most trusted voice in metals and mining. I'm your host, Darrell Thomas, and today we have the pleasure of interviewing Dave Collum of Cornell University. How you doing today, Dave?
I'm doing okay.
Should I call you Professor Dave or just Dave?
Dave, just
call
Dave.
You Dave.
Just Dave.
All right. You know, Professor Dave has a ring to it.
Yeah. Professor Dave is okay. Professor Collum drives me nuts.
I got you. So just curious in your thoughts on the markets and the recent performance of the commodities, the metals, and the broad indices. Just curious in your thoughts on the markets.
Yeah, it's like the markets are on black ice, right? It's like a teenager on black ice, and you go on, it's fishtailing back and forth, and you got to figure at some point it's going to hit a tree, but don't know when that'll be. I've been calling it for so long. I'm the broken clock, so I don't know. We'll see. But looks to me like the big events, which I don't include Iran in terms of markets. I don't think geopolitical things affect markets as much as, well, on the other hand, if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed, I have to take that back. A normal brawl with Iran would not be a problem. Closing the Strait is a big problem. I was about to say something really stupid there. It looks to me like the private credit market has blown up. It's not done blowing up, so it's not over. I think the yen carry trade is at one point it built up for decades, and then all of a sudden there's about 3 days of market turbulence, and they said that's over. I don't believe that. I don't think you have a carry trade of such magnitude that just all of a sudden resolves in 3 days. So I figure that's probably doing something below the surface. So I think private equity is probably stressing the system because they've taken out a lot of bank loans to cover their private credit problems and their real estate problems. And so I think the banks are more exposed to risk than the world wants to let on. The NASDAQ is all the standard equity markets. I'm not a technical guy, but they really do look like they're rolling over, right? There's this sort of rounded top, and anyone who analyzes them and looks back, 2 or 3 or 4 years is not taking a big picture look. So, if someone's calling a bottom here, they're out of their minds, in my opinion. So,
yeah. I was watching a recent clip with Warren Buffett, and Buffett was saying that, we haven't seen anything yet, so he wouldn't be deploying any capital at this point because he's seen the S&P drop 20% in one day. And so, curious in your thoughts on Buffett's perspective.
Well, I mean, he's a smart guy. He's pretty old, so I'm not sure he's actually going to be the one buying when the time comes. He's something like 97, I think. Buffett didn't go to what? 300 or 400 billion in cash to then jump back in the markets after a 10% decline, and that wouldn't faze him. He sees something much, much bigger coming, and it could be he's clearing the deck for his successor, where he's saying, "Look, I don't want to leave you with a bunch of liabilities, so here's a wad of cash. You get to chart the future course of Berkshire." But I think more likely is that he's teeing up for bargains, and we're nowhere near bargains. We're not even close, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. So that's broad indices. What are your thoughts on the mining equities and equities related to gold and silver? Well,
I'm always distrustful of the miners because they seem to not know how to really make money. Right now they've been very profitable as investments, but you may recall when gold went from 256 to 1900 and then relaxed back to around 1200, which is a round number of fourfold gain, 300% gain, and the equities gave it all back. And a number of CEOs heard from me one way or another where I said, "What did you guys do? How did you blow it so badly? You sold a product that went up fourfold in price, and you somehow didn't capture any of those gains in your share price? I don't get it." And so, it's kind of the hole in the ground with a liar at the opening. And so I own them, but I feel better owning Philip Morris. I feel better owning stuff like that. I feel better owning Rio Tinto. And the price of gold has been erratic in the sense that it went probably too far too fast, but it might not have been too fast. It might have been that central bankers wanted it that badly, right? I mean, it could be it was a reset, but then the selling. I don't think it was weak hand selling. I actually think it was people who needed big capital probably selling that. These are all narratives, right? You and I were stuck with the internet. You get to talk to people, but I can accept one of the narratives being that there was big money caught on the wrong side of some energy trade, some trade having to do with the Strait of Hormuz, and that they had to liquidate a bunch of gold to cover some cost that they didn't see coming. And so I'm kind of hoping that's it, because they'll be back. That's just a temporary liquidity problem. And I don't think retail investor had gotten into gold in a big way yet. I mean, guys who I chat with have, but they're not normal people. They're obviously nuts. I think that the commitment to precious metals is probably at 20% what it historically is said to be warranted. And a lot of people dismiss that as well. Those are the olden days, but I'm kind of a believer in regression to the mean.
So what's been really interesting with gold is that it's been moving in line with the emotions and the impulses of President Trump. So sometimes there's a post that comes out on Truth Social that, we're reaching a deal, and then you'll see gold rally with the broad equities. Then you'll get I think the other day he did like the nation address, and he did not really calm markets in that nation address. I guess he didn't speak in regards to when is this going to end or things of that nature. And then he threatened to blow up some more stuff. I think we actually blew up a bridge over in Iran. And so,
I saw that. That.
Yeah. So, it's kind of interesting how how gold's been, it's kind of been like a beach ball in the water, and it kind of just depends on when the president speaks. Sometimes when he speaks, the beach ball just starts to come up and it starts to rally. And then whenever he changes his mind, it goes down. So it's been kind of interesting to seeing how gold performed that way.
Well, the other thing, I have this working model for Iran. So the question is, who's winning, right? The definition of winning is very different for the two sides. Very different for the two sides. So, for example, for the three sides, if you want. So you got Israel, U.S. on one side, sort of, but different interests. And Iran on the other, and then you got the Arab states who are kind of catching collateral damage the whole way. For the U.S. to win, I don't even know why we're in the war. I'm now pretty hated by the Zionists at this point. So,
Yeah.
but it's not our war, in my opinion. None of the wars are our wars. You have to go so far back to the Civil War was our war. So I don't know how we win. We win by if Trump gets us the hell out of there, right? If he says, "Look, I'm done," right? When the Marine barracks blew up in Beirut in 82, 83, somewhere in there, Reagan showed leadership by saying, "This is screwed up. We're getting out." That was leadership. He realized the Middle East was not a place to be leaving your Marines in harm's way. Will Trump be able to do that? If he can, then I give him a hat tip for having taken the wrong path and then backed away and said, "Okay, I'm going to correct that." I think Israel's goal is to simply destroy Iran, and I don't think they're going to win. I don't see how they can win that. Iran's way too ominous, and the debate about who has more weapons is a fascinating one because they're extreme, right? So Trump will stand at the podium and say they got nothing left. We've taken out everything. We've blown up every taxi cab. They got nothing left. And I keep seeing Iran doing damage, and I have this funny feeling that we're getting a earful of propaganda. And I think Iran's had 40 years to plan for this. So A friend of mine who's ex-military said, look, Iran segmented into 31 districts such that you couldn't take out the leadership. They were basically created a country of sleeper cells. And that any one of those 31 districts can inflict pain independently of the other 30. And that's an interesting model. I haven't seen anyone else talk about it. Iran wins, in my opinion, if they can achieve a couple things. One is obviously survive without getting completely destroyed, without getting completely flattened, which Israel would love to do, and that's why I don't support Israel. And if they do serious damage to the world economy. And the reason that strikes me as important, and I don't hear people talking about this, which I think they should, if Iran does serious damage to the economy, and then, the Strait of Hormuz opens organically, right? So then we back away and we find a way and it opens, but there's been serious damage. The next time Israel wants to beat on Iran, and Israel's got a habit of going back for more, right? They're bombing Lebanon right now, right? Well, I don't know why. I haven't been able to figure out why. They're doing serious damage to Lebanon, and no one's paying attention to this. They're displacing 600,000 people. No one's paying attention to it. Next time Israel goes at Iran, the rest of the world will mug them and say, stop. We do not want to go through that again. Yeah. So I think if Iran resolved this without doing damage, and some say they've already done it, right? Some say the damage is done. We're not feeling it yet, but we will. The fertilizer shortage, helium shortage, things like that. I just don't know. I could believe it, but I don't know. But if Iran inflicts serious damage to the point where people say, I do not want to do that again, then the rest of the world will contain Israel and Iran will be in a better place. Now, I'm not saying I'm rooting for Iran. This is game theory. This is like watching the red team and the blue team, right, in a football game. I do have a voice in my head that leaves me conflicted, where we've had many wars where they look like, from our perspective, it's like reality TV. So you watch Schwarzkopf, narrating bombing Iraq and blowing up bridges with weapons of a quality we didn't know they had, that sort of thing. And we've never been able to really witness the damage done by our military actions. And so it is, there's inflation, there's debt, there's all sorts of things, but the average Joe doesn't make that connection. And so for us, it's like watching a TV show. It never causes explicit pain to us. 4,000 guys died in the Middle East over the last 20 years, I think 4,000 U.S. soldiers, but they're guys who signed up voluntarily. They're often from low socioeconomic groups, so half the country just says, they did it, we don't care, you can imagine. And I have this sense of karma that at some point we're going to learn that war has horrors associated with it. We haven't personally experienced that. And I could imagine all of a sudden finding that. And I don't know what it would be, but in a little voice in my head, this is where it gets dark, is I'm thinking we should learn that. Yeah. We should learn that. You shouldn't be able to just say, let's go bomb these guys and say nothing will happen to us. That's not healthy to me. There should be, like in a labor management dispute, when you're all done, both sides should have lost something, right? The two teams should have forfeited something, right? The strike should have cost labor something. The settlement should cost management something, right? You can't have always one side winning. Yeah. Because that leads to very destructive behavior. And so I have this sense of karma where something going to happen.
I got a point to that. So it is interesting because when we look at these cycles, right, whether you look at the fourth turning, the big debt cycle or whatever, the later cycles have a disassociation or no connection with the first cycles or the first turnings that actually experience like these major conflicts and wars. I mean, thinking about even after World War II, you know, when Roosevelt and the United Nations were formed and all of that, like they formed that for a reason, for world peace and stuff. And now you have like that being ripped and shredded apart. And, you know, I think Trump was saying like, hey, we're done with NATO or whatever the case may be. But like, you know, all this stuff was formed for a reason. And a lot of those reasons were connected to because of the atrocities of war and such that other generations experienced before us.
So when I wrote about that this year, I actually listed, Grant Williams said it well, I think he said that institutions will be destroyed. Institutions that built up in the first three turnings will be destroyed in the fourth. So what could those be? Well, there's some obvious things, like NATO could fall apart. The European Union could fall apart. There's some real obvious ones that are easy. There could be countries that cease to exist. So Ukraine could cease to exist. Israel could cease to exist. Iran could cease to exist. There's a bunch of candidates. Taiwan could cease to exist. But then there's things like the Constitution, right? We're really pressing it. We're really doing some bizarre stuff. I do not like using lawfare, no matter whose team we're talking about, because it's you shouldn't weaponize the legal system, and it already has inherent unfairness built into it. You do not need to institutionalize that. You shouldn't embrace it. We shouldn't be using the courts to fight political battles. And so I don't like that. So there's a lot of institutions that could fail. And at the end, some could fail where we go, boy, I did not see that coming. That one I did not understand. And so, again, this gets back to the karmic thing, gets back to the, you know, I think we really have to blow it badly in some way. And I don't know how it's going to be, but I do know you want to be playing defense. You want to be protecting yourself, which is where the metals come in. It's where get out of, I wouldn't be buying NVIDIA. I wouldn't be buying the Mag 7. I don't care if it keeps going up for a while. If you knew there was a train coming, you didn't have the schedule, you wouldn't sleep on the tracks. You'd get off the tracks, say, look, I'm going to some safe place where no matter when the train comes, I'm going to be okay. Jeremy Grantham, I read his book this year, and he does a very good job about describing the price he paid being early on all the bubbles. He called the Nikkei, he called the .com. He was always early. He lost assets under management. He said, eventually my investors made a lot of money, but they were not the same investors that I started with. They're new ones, the ones who bailed on him in 1998 because he didn't sign off on the .com bubble. They did not come back. And so new investors came back. And so
our project is right in the southeastern corner of Wyoming. In the space of 4 years, fully engineered, fully permitted.
The ASIC is what caught my eye, $937 per ounce.
110,000 ounces per annum. First year of production is the most impressive. 132,000 ounces of gold, 24 million pounds of copper. You really want these things front-end loaded like that. US Gold Corp is a near-term, low-cost gold producer in Wyoming. To learn more, go to usgoldcorp.com.
Yeah. So I'm curious in your thoughts. So, like, obviously, you have the United States in this conflict. You have Israel, and they have their interests. And their interest doesn't necessarily suit the American people as much. I'm actually watching the documentary, the BB Files.
Yes, I watched that. It was a little boring, I thought. I didn't think it was that interesting, but yeah.
Yeah, it shows like political grifters, right? It's like, these politicians are grifters, Dave.
I think Bibi himself is a very bad person. I think Israel is being run by a real punk.
Yeah. It was really, really insightful because, I don't get involved in like these foreign politics or whatnot, but now we're at the point where it's like, hey, this is kind of driving us.
You can't ignore it. You can't ignore it.
Right. So you have these interests. They have their interests. We have our interests. Iran has their interests. And And the Strait of Hormuz is like, to my understanding, could put the world on the brink of a global depression.
It's possible we're already there. That's the question I've asked a number of people. If the whole thing somehow resolved today, if Trump and Iran and Israel sort of shook hands and said, okay, let's not do this anymore today, is it possible we've already done the damage and that we'll see it? Like, for example, is it possible that the fertilizer deficiency will show up as famine in some countries later this year? You tend to have starvation in the spring when food runs out. So things like that. So most of the people I talk to seem to think that's true, that we're already past the fail-safe point. We're already at some point where serious damage, although not yet showing up, has been done. We have organ failure.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think that's true or not? What do you think?
I think that there's certain countries that are going to be hurt more. I mean, like I'm looking at the Philippines, right? Philippines are getting rocked with diesel.
Japan, Taiwan are energy zeros,
Yeah, so that's something that I'm definitely paying attention to. I do think that it's possible. I've been listening to a lot of Luke Groman and him talking about it. And he's saying like every day, the Strait is closed. It puts us in more dire situation. And right now the Strait is still closed. I think the last thing I read was that Iran and Oman was working on something, some toll booth or whatever the case may be, where ships have to pay a toll to come through or whatnot. Trump said it was illegal and such, and so it's just been kind of
who cares? It's a war. It's a war. What's this illegal part, right? You can say it's illegal all you want. Was it illegal to flatten Dresden in World War II? I mean, holy moly. Luke has been very good because Luke has been coming up with some hard numbers about there are this many days of diesel left, in this country. Luke has been really documenting the stockpiles and how they've been shrinking dramatically. And so, yeah, Luke's been doing a particularly good job, in my opinion. And by the way, everything's a just-in-time inventory. Years and years ago, we realized that inventory is money, right? To carry warehouses full of stuff is costly. And so we developed an entire economy based on just-in-time delivery. Now, what we didn't seem to recognize at the time is that the cost savings is at the expense of the cost savings is increased fragility. So if you've got only 2 days of inventory because you expect it to get delivered, it doesn't take a big interruption for you to all of a sudden not be able to get it. Mm-hmm. And so there's a fragility in the system. And so if, for example, 5% of the oil, 5% of any product can't make it to market, that's 5% of the consumers who can't get it. And that's a lot when you think about not being able to get oil, not being able to get diesel, not being able to get chips, not being able to get, right? That's no longer, it's no longer necessarily an absorbable quantity.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious, are you positioned in oil? And then also I'm curious in your thoughts on the upcoming meeting with President Trump and Xi Jinping. So that's been it's on the horizon, and I know that they've had some issues with rare earths and such in the past, and tariffs and such, and so I'm curious how this is going to play into that.
Well, so first and foremost, people need to know, for example, the rare earths, they're not rare. Yeah. I actually must have been 10 years ago. I had a weird dinner with the CEO of Chemitol, which is a big mining operation, and the mayor of Gosselin, Germany. It was really a strange dinner, and there were a couple other people. But I asked the CEO. I said, "Is it true that there's no rare earths except in China?" He said, "No, that's not true at all." He said, "China has simply undercut our prices." So China provides 95% because they can work without regulations, with paying no wages to speak of, right, by our standards, and so they can just undercut the prices. So there are no rare earth suppliers right now. There's tons of rare earths. Now, here the problem, you know as well as anybody, you don't just start up a mine today and have it working in September. And there's a lot of fictional stuff out there, like when, forget a mine, when some company like, some tech company says, we're going to build a plant for $50 billion that builds chips in Texas, I go, they will not break ground while Trump's in office. You don't just all of a sudden design and build a chip plant. I've been involved in renovations. Behind me, you can see my office got flooded, as you know, but the reader might not, the listener might not. I'm in temporary space. I've been involved in renovations. At Cornell, to renovate a floor takes us 2 years. There's a year of planning and a year of renovating. So what's it like to build a chip plant? Right, a multi-gazillion-dollar chip plant. And the answer is a very long time. And so who said it? Brendan Ike in a Twitter Spaces that I was invited to, but Brendan and I took over. He said it's a multi-generational problem to bring manufacturing and mining and things like that back to the United States. It took several generations to lose it. It's going to take several generations to get it back. So all these companies promising to do things in the U.S., it's not going to happen on some time scale that's going to affect Trump. These guys are by the way, if you design a $50 billion chip manufacturing plant and then all of a sudden Trump's a lame duck and you no longer have to worry about what he's going to do to you if you don't build it, you can take that plant, you can just simply put it in Taiwan or put it in Indonesia or someplace like that. The same design. You just find a new site. And so they can do all the planning they want until they've dug up the ground and started construction. It's not here. And it's going to take years for them to be actually producing wealth. People say, well, building the plants, well, no, it's not. If you build a farm and built the barns and built everything, but you planted no crops and raised no livestock, you haven't made a penny. It's a sunken cost. You start making money when you start growing the crops, you start raising the livestock, and you start slaughtering them and harvesting. That's wealth creation. The first part's the cost of teeing up. And so building the plant, it'll create jobs, but it's based on debt. So it's a net, it's not a gain. It foreshadows gain in the future.
Yeah. So this isn't like the grand ballroom of the White House or
which is said to be some military operation, right? Trump came out and said it was for some military reason, right? Who knows? One thing he is he's the greatest bullshit artist to ever be in the White House, right? And that's quite a high bar, right?
For sure. Okay, yeah, definitely. So oil. So have you been positioned in oil? What's your thoughts on oil moving forward? Do you think that's a good sector folks to look at?
Well, so I was in energy to fight inflation from 01 to probably 15. So I caught this huge upside just trying to fight inflation. I didn't see the commodity boom coming. It showed up, thankfully, and I made a ton of money during a decade. Everyone else was losing money, but it was just because I was worried about inflation. So it wasn't genius. It was just, and the headline inflation never even showed up. Was out in 16, oddly not even my own decision, because I'd already paid a price. It had already gone back down. I got kicked out of my energy funds by Fidelity because they're part of Cornell's retirement program. And I looked up, I said, wait a minute, where'd they go? So I asked about 6 hedge fund managers, okay, I got kicked out. I think I know how to get back in them. Should I? And they said, no, not now. And so I didn't. And then around 2020, I made my first sort of baby steps back into energy. Now, here's the problem I have. If the markets are profoundly overvalued, and I mean profound like 200% over historical average valuation, a 3x historical valuation, everything will sell. They're all joined. The correlation will be very high. So if you own the S&P 500 index fund and you're selling, You're selling Philip Morris, you're selling energy, you're selling everything. And it's a single keystroke. You literally, if you own the Vanguard Index Fund and you say, I'm not comfortable, I'm getting out, I can't afford to lose anymore, you no longer cherry pick your way through the risky investments. You just hit S&P Index Fund, sell. And the whole market gets sold. And there's no liquidity in those funds. They have to sell. And so it's not clear what the downside is going to look like if the flow into those index funds reverses Mike Green style, right? And so you could have the best idea. And one time Jesse Felder said, don't let your bearishness prevent you from spotting good ideas. But I actually think good ideas will become great ideas later. And so I'm really more building a wish list. But I did in 2020 start. And then about a year ago, you know how the XLE sat there flat in the pancake for about 2 years? I mean, it was a real flat line. Platinum sat flat line for 10 years. I was watching that like a hawk going, when that thing flickers, because platinum is way underproduced. And so I made a great call on platinum last year. When it flickered, I started buying fast. And that worked well. But I still didn't get up to a big position, but it was a great call. Just didn't size it right. Same thing with energy, flatlined. And the question is this going to take off from this flatline, or is it going to dip? And it started to take off. So I bought a slug and then started sort of a monthly buy program. And it's paid well. Again, I'm not up to a big position. It took me 4 years to get up to a full position in gold. I can't do the, got a hunch, buy a bunch investing. It seems too risky to me. So, but markets move quickly. So I continue to buy energy, knowing that if the markets all sell off, I'll probably get a little wounded. But it's been paying off well so far.
Yeah, for sure. How much liquidity are you keeping? Like, what's your view on liquidity? So obviously, when people are selling, they need to get liquid, they need to get cash to take care of whatever. How important do you think liquidity is? And then do you have a specific allocation, like, okay, I'm keeping a lot of liquidity or whatnot?
Well, so it depends on what you call gold. Gold and cash equivalents are my two biggest positions, and they're, God, I have to think back, but they're like 35 or 40% apiece. And then the rest of the baloney is maybe 20%. And some percentage of my net worth is tied up in my house, which is way more expensive than what I need. I owned a farmhouse, it was cheap. It was a nice house, but it was a farmhouse. And I bought a house on the lake hanging off a 100-foot cliff, just a wonderful existence. But it was probably 3 times the cost of what I needed for dwelling. So you got to somehow call it a real estate play or something, because it tied up a lot. But that's probably the next biggest. It's probably 10% of my assets. I don't know, something like that. And then 10% in baloney, Philip Morris and British American Tobacco and Rio Tinto and things like that.
So paying you some good dividends. Curious.
I'm very much of a dividend, low debt guy. I look for a company that's got dividends and debt that's manageable.
Yeah. So obviously you got like the tobacco stocks. You got Rio Tinto and such. Are you in a real estate investment trust or?
No, I think real estate's got a bad time coming.
I'm
a Melody Wright fan, right? Melody Wright tells horror stories. I believe them.
Yeah. What's kind of your thesis on the real estate market?
Well, I think it's starting. I think that bubble's starting to burst too, and so there's regions of the country in which so the guys who we entered a period that's rare, unprecedented, where the new houses were selling for less than used houses. And you say, well, why would that be? Because they're normally much more expensive. And I think it's because the home builders are not stupid. They've been around the block a few times. And they realize the end's here, and so they're liquidating their assets. So they're selling aggressively. And so I think they're the tip of the spear. I think houses have to drop 30% before the young generation can afford to buy them, and I do not agree with lowering the rates to try to do that. I do not like that idea. And the reason is because what are you doing when you lower the rates? You're trying to keep the price of houses up. So what are you going to do? You're going to take a young generation who are burdened with student debt, and you're attempting to make them buy assets that are mispriced. You're attempting to make them buy houses that are mispriced. Mm-hmm. And at some point, when rates finally do go up, they'll be left holding the bag yet again. And so, no, I think the boomers ought to give up the valuations that they gained incorrectly, that the house became overvalued, and the boomers should give it back. And the younger generation should be allowed to buy at a reasonable valuation relative to what they can afford. So the guys who say we should lower rates, this bugs the crap out of me. Everyone, how many people have you talked to said we kept rates too low for too long? Right? Everyone says that. I add to that too many times. We did it over and over and over. And now they're saying we should drop rates. I go, you sound like a crackhead. Right? No, we should not lower rates. We should let prices rediscover.
Yeah, I'm curious of your thoughts on so the midterms coming up. So President Trump was essentially trying to buy the midterms for a while. He came out with the 50-year mortgage, and then he mentioned lowering rates.
That was a bomb.
He mentioned getting rates lower. I mean, Jerome Powell even got subpoenaed or indicted or whatever the case. They brought some charges against him. Then there was this initiative with the White House buying mortgage-backed securities to lower rates and stuff. But then he said that he didn't want people's home equity values to go down and such. And so it was like some conflicting messages there. And so with the issue of affordability, and I just been kind of thinking about like the midterm elections. It just seems like it's going to be a landslide or something. I don't know.
It could be. I just don't think you can possibly make an argument that it's in the best interest of the younger generations to buy houses that are still elevated. I don't see that. Those guys, you know what the best thing to do is to buy assets that are cheap, to buy houses that are cheap.
Yep. Yep.
And everything you just mentioned is all an attempt to keep them expensive, so that the boomers can get out of their positions and dump them on the next generation. And then I get accused. People saying, like I saw on Twitter just say, someone says, well, there's the guy who wants interest rates at 10% so he can get his yield. I go, I'm actually saying you should hurt my entire generation. So these are just stupid people. They're ignorant bots or something. I don't know what they are, but we should. Price discovery has been missing from these markets and from society everywhere. Inflation is way more than people think, right? Yeah. Well, actually, not people. Way more than the pundits say. The average person knows inflation's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, it seems like the administration's trying everything they can. They're trying to pull anything out of the hat that they can. I mean, I'm looking at the tariff revenue. We're supposed to get a tariff dividend that never came through. A Doge dividend that never came through. So I'm just kind of, the folks that were like voting based off America First and making the lives of Americans better. It seemed like many of them were pissed off.
I think legitimately, and I think the straw on the camel's back is the Iranian war. Right, so I think if you were to ask the MAGA guys, what's the bottom line for you? And I think is staying out of foreign wars. And so I think, the Epstein files didn't help Trump, right?
Yeah,
and so I was euphoric for the first couple of months of his presidency. I said, oh, this guy is finally going to go in with a wrecking ball and really take out some of the superstructure. You know, the idea of hiring a bunch of computer whiz kids to find the waste was so brilliant. And then they didn't do anything with it. Right? Big Balls. Remember Big Balls? That was such a great story. And yet they didn't solve it. They didn't fix any of the problem. Maybe they have, and maybe it's just we're seeing new money flying around that they can't control. And yeah, I do podcasts with guys who think that Trump's a hero and he's just fighting powerful forces. But I'm going on. I'd like to see more fight now. I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, whatever happened to Elon Musk? I mean, I keep thinking of that meme where Homer Simpson just like fades away into the bushes.
Yeah, I know that meme. Yeah.
It seems like that's what Elon Musk has been doing. Like, I don't know, he's been kind of absent, or maybe
he's gone. Right? No, he's gone. Right? He's not near the White House. So Elon either A, just wanted access to federal data, and the whole thing was a ruse. Or B, he wanted to help fix the system and he got frustrated. I'm hoping it's B, I think, because I'd like to think that at least someone tried. On the other hand, that's a very dark view because it means therefore you can't fix it, right? But again, the foreign wars with $300 billion to Ukraine can you make an argument why we care where the borders are in Ukraine? I can't. And I can make the case that Putin tried to tell us for a dozen years that they can't bring NATO into Ukraine. Now, they would call it bringing Ukraine into NATO. But Putin said, look, for us, Ukraine is existential risk. All the marauders who have ever gone through Europe, it cuts off the Black Sea. The whole thing, he was crystal clear. It would be like us saying, look to Putin, you can't have Mexico, right? Period. Yet we did it. We spent $300 billion, and that's right down the toilet. And there's now over 1 million dead Ukrainians. It's a country that's going to take generations to rebuild. And all these people died because NATO wanted a war. How sick is that? That is really sick. And the Ukrainian mothers, they want their kids back. I bet you couldn't find anyone in Ukraine who says, oh, yeah, I'm glad we fought this war. Yeah. It was just a big grift. There was money being funneled back to the DNC. There was just a huge grift. You know, Ukraine is the number 3 consumer of Bentleys.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, right. I wonder where all our money went. Right? So you know, you hear about Ukraine hitting Russia with this or that weapon. I go, Ukraine didn't hit Russia. Those guys don't know how to even, maybe one of them said, okay, here we are in this big sophisticated installation. They said, hey, you Ukrainian, push that red button right there. The guy pushed it and then boom, we hit Russia. It's all NATO-based weaponry. Bombing Russia. How did this happen? I grew up in a world you didn't bomb Russia. Period.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, how do you speculate this may end? I mean, some folks are saying World War III.
Well, you could argue we're in it.
Global depression.
You could argue we're in it.
You know, so just curious, and just kind of how you're thinking through.
Well, a fourth turning model says it ends with a grand finale. Right? It ends with a real sort of blow-off disaster top. And then you get to the first turning where you start seeing green shoots and you rebuild structures necessary to prevent it from ever happening again. And 60 years later, it will start happening again. And I have a plot that I make where I draw, it's an inflation-adjusted S&P. I'm kind of jumping the rails here. Inflation-adjusted S&P, where if you own the 1929 top, it took you 20 years to get back to even. But the question is not how long it took to get even. The question is, how long did it take to get even for the last time? And it turns out, I think 5 times in the 20th century from top to trough, no change in price, lasted 40 to 75 years. So if you own a top, you're toast. If you own the growing bubble, you're at great risk. If you own the top, right? If you own the Nikkei in 1989, right now, without adjusting for inflation, you're now ahead. When this global economy goes to shit and Japan can't get any energy, how's that Nikkei going to be doing, right? So that Nikkei could end up doing 40 years of zero gains, when the people who owned the Nikkei in 1989 owned 14 of the 20 biggest companies in the world. How could you go wrong? And I go, 40 years of going wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just so many things that could go south. And it's not, these various geopolitical events are triggers, they're not causal. We're not going to be screwed because of some event in the Strait of Hormuz. But the thing that could go really bad could be triggered by the Strait of Hormuz. The risk to us is to have everything out of balance, to have markets way overpriced. Now you're waiting for just something, right? Someone to sneeze, some vibration, some butterfly flapping its wings. Once you're way overvalued, you're shock sensitive. The shock doesn't matter. It's the sensitivity that matters.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally get that. Well, Dave, I appreciate you coming back on the show and everything. Where can people get some of your humorous commentary and such? I know you're active on the X, and you're always putting out some good information for folks to go and check out.
So I'm at David B. Collum on X. I publish a year in review at Peak Prosperity that typically is about 300 pages, and I write it in the fall. Someone tell me how I do that. I don't know. I turned out with Bob Moriarty's help, him paying for a copy editor, he fronted the money. All I had to do was help. I published 17 volumes of year in reviews, around 4,000 pages, and they all got published in 2025. So I was writing my Dean's report, and I started to say, look, I wrapped up my research group a year ago, so I haven't done shit. And I'm told my Dean's reports are entertaining. And then I realized I published 17 books in 2025. I go, wow. Who publishes 17 books in 1 year? 4,000 pages in 1 year. That's a lot. And I tried to get them to be discounted if you buy them all to the point where there's no profit margin. My cost, you buy all 17, you get them no profit. But I couldn't figure out how to get Amazon to do it. Now, I explicitly asked, they said, you can't do it. I thought there ought to be some bulk discount for the group. Why that doesn't exist, I don't know. So the whole group would cost probably at $20 a pop, less than $400. I think if someone read them all, I learned a ton from reading my own writing for 17 years. I learned a ton from going, holy shit, I forgot about that. And so, if someone wants it, I'm not selling it to get rich. I guarantee you I've got better ways to make money than writing 4,000 pages of book and selling 20 copies.
That's pure passion right there.
Yeah, that's purely it's like my diary, right? It's a diary. And that's why Bob wanted to publish it. And I know a good friend, Tony Deeden, bought the whole set. He sent a picture of himself with the set. And some people will buy it, I think. But I'm only plugging it because it's kind of an achievement.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's a lot to be proud of.
That's it. And go to YouTube, right? Once they're done with your podcast, if they go to YouTube, they'll find just hundreds of podcasts, and they'll realize I'm just repeating myself at some level. So, but my theme changes. My theme drifts as things go up and down. If you listen to one from 6 months ago, it's different than today. But you listen to the one I did this morning, it's similar to today's.
Yeah, I think the equations kind of get altered a little bit with these unexpected twists and turns
Each week.
That we're constantly having to update, even though the long-term thesis is intact, how we get there definitely changes. So,
right.
Well, appreciate you for coming on the show, Dave. Everyone, be sure to go check out Dave's content on X as well as YouTube, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. Love to have your support. And until next time, Dave.